and welcome to Puccini's Madama Butturfly, one of the best loved, most frequently done operas in the whole of the world. For those of you who are seeing it for the first time tonight, you will soon understand why. By 1900, Giulio Ricordi, who was Puccini's publisher, was beginning to think that he might get a return on his investment. He'd been supporting this young, fledgling composer during the first two operas that he presented to the world, both of which were rejected by the critics and the public. Finally, though, he had sort of had a success with Manuel Lescaut. Next, his La Bohème was a big success, and now Tosca was the rage of Europe. Puccini was in London overseeing the first productions at the Royal Opera House, and while in London, he took the opportunity to see David Belasco's play, Madame Butterfly. David Belasco was an American impresario. There's still a Broadway theater, the David Belasco Theater, named after him, in operation still today. But he was one of the leading American impresarios. He was the first theater presenter to realize the potential of using electrical lighting for the stage. Audiences were, before David Belasco, used to kerosene lanterns with reflectors lined up across the front of the stage, and that was sort of it for lighting effect. With electricity, you could bring rheostats up and down and create things that the audience had never dreamt of before. His theaters were packed for everything that he presented, and the New York run of Madame Butterfly had been a huge success. When they finished in New York, they packed up the production, went to London, and repeated the success there with full audiences night after night. Belasco had written the play himself, and it was based on a story told in a short story that had been published in a magazine, a short story by John Luther Long, in which he describes the opening up of Japan to Western trade, a Western man who goes there and takes a 15-year-old Japanese bride, more as an amusement than anything else. And of course, he's warned that she's taking this very seriously. In fact, she's investing everything in this relationship, and he's of course being very cavalier about it. Tragedy ensues, and Belasco was able to make a pretty moving theatrical property out of it. Puccini went to see the play in London in 1900. He spoke 3 words of English, and even so, he completely got it. He immediately sensed the potential this gripping story had to create a really compelling night at the opera with these fascinating, exotic characters and this almost unprecedented, tragic situation that this poor girl finds herself in. He began to negotiate for permission to use the property to create an opera. It was granted, and he went to work. He worked slowly, and it took him 4 years to complete it. The premiere was in 1904 at La Scala, and it is a legendary disaster. People still talk about it today. The reason, more than the opera's fault, was that the theater was full of all of Puccini's rivals and their followers. And they created such a disruption and such a ruckus, no one could really concentrate on the piece. Finally, by the middle of the show, people were just yelling out in the audience, and it was this pandemonium. Puccini withdrew the piece after that one performance, made a few adjustments. Most of them seemed to be judicious trims that made the show move a little more quickly and you know, if gathered speed at sort of a better rate. And after 3 months, he lined it up for a second premiere at a different theater in Italy, and the rest is history. In more than 100 years, Madama Butterfly has never given up its place among the 10 most popular and frequently done operas in the world. That's a long time. Some of our most beloved pieces of American musical theater, all the Rodgers and Hammerstein properties, for example, they go through long periods of a decade or more, maybe 2, without any real important productions, and then we'll see a revival come along. Not so with Madama Butterfly. It is almost always in production in at least 1 or 2 places in the world at any given time, and so has been for 100 years. Puccini did some really inventive things. This was really his 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th opera, and he didn't write many more his career would be sort of limited to fewer than 10, which is an anomaly. Most of these opera composers like Donizetti and Bellini and Rossini certainly wrote lots and lots of operas. Verdi had written a great many operas before Puccini's time. And Puccini worked slowly and his output was by and large minimal, but some of his works constitute at least 3 of the central pillars of the whole modern operatic repertory: La Bohème, Tosca, and Madama Butterfly. Those are almost unsurpassed in their popularity and their great theatrical and musical experiences. Puccini also developed characters more effectively than he had previously done in this piece, and was able to create a sense that was really new to the audiences and deeply moving in a real verissimo, punch in the gut way, if you will. Puccini's audiences loved this piece, and everyone talked about it, and few operas have really left a bigger mark on popular culture than Madama Butterfly. The premiere was 1904. In 1916, a pair of Americans wrote a popular song entitled Poor Butterfly. It was published in 1916. If you Google that, you will see at least 200 recordings that have been made of that song from everyone, including Tony Bennett, for the love of God. It's just amazing how standard a cover that became.
There's a story told of a little Japanese.
It also influenced Miss Saigon, a hugely popular theatrical property, and David Henry Wang's M. Butterfly, of course influenced by this opera as well. And once again, you'll understand why few operas really create a bigger impact with audiences than this. Puccini opens the opera on a hillside over the harbor of Nagasaki. We have an American naval officer, Lieutenant Benjamin Franklin Pinkerton, talking with a marriage broker. I think that's actually a more polite term for his profession than one might actually choose to employ. But the marriage broker has arranged a bride for him to marry. He explains to the American consul, who walks up the hill to join him, that he's leased this little charming house for 999 years, but with an exit clause so he can slip out at any time without any advance notice. Puccini finishes the opera with a chord that we anticipate musically to be one thing, and when that last chord hits, it has the effect of a door slamming in our face. Puccini's basically saying, boy, that sure didn't turn out well, did it? And indeed it did not, but it makes for a majestic night at the opera and a great opportunity for a real singing actress to really have a star night. This role is coveted by all sopranos who can sing it, but that's the trick. It's a role so tough because Butterfly is on stage virtually the whole evening and singing with huge emotional intensity the whole time that a lot of judicious sopranos have recognized that they'll never really get through it. And we have many famous sopranos who've recorded the opera, some more than once, but never ever felt they could sustain the whole performance on the stage of this role. You will certainly see a magnificently sustained performance tonight of one of the world's best known operas. Thank you all for coming and enjoy this performance.